was on this day in 1632. John Locke was born in the UK. He was a philosopher and physician and regarded as one of the most influential of Enlightenment thinkers and championed individual rights. His impact still being felt today, especially when it comes to social change. This includes things like same-sex marriage and marijuana legalization.
So how do attitudes towards social issues change so quickly? Caroline Cornish set out to find the answer back in 2016.
A politician, 3 professors, and a priest. Sounds like the beginning of some bad joke, but really this is our panel. The politician,
No, it's not my business. It's certainly not the government's business.
a libertarian Republican. The professors specialize in American government, sociology, and global affairs. The priest,
There's a huge movement towards compassion.
an Episcopalian. The question, why is it that significant social change, like the legalization of same-sex marriage or the legalization of marijuana, can happen so fast? The answers? Well, they did vary widely, but 2 points kept coming up again and again. First, people tend to change their minds when they connect with someone who is different than they are.
For better or worse?
For better, for worse.
You are joined in marriage as wife and wife. You may kiss your bride.
What happens is that people's hearts change. And I think people's hearts change about an issue when they are what we call as suffused with compassion. When they see and know people that, and open themselves up to people that they think are different than them, and then, shocker, they're not different than them.
There's a new generation of Americans right now. They're not necessarily buying into their parents' or grandparents', worldview, and then they feel freer to decide for themselves and not be bound by the puritanical, punitive culture that had prevailed in the United States for so long.
Why do you think it is that your generation has become more open to different choices?
You know, I think in large part, I think the internet plays a huge part in it. I think because in the world of the internet, we are all connected so much more. When people have a friend or a loved one who live their life in a way that they had previously condemned, when they know those people as full human beings, full people, it's and you still love that person, I think it's hard to look at that in exactly the same way as maybe you did before.
There has been more change, for example, in the 20th century than in the maybe 30 centuries that preceded it, because the combination of technology and innovation accelerates the tempo of change.
And the other reason that kept coming up for why these changes are happening so fast, maybe the concepts of legalizing same-sex marriage and marijuana use aren't as revolutionary as we might think.
The political culture in the United States is sort of, it's kind of biased libertarian, I would say. It's certainly biased liberal with a capital L, kind of going back to John Stuart Mill, and John Locke. And so the rights of the individual tend to, on the whole, tend to be pretty big trump cards.
Turns out Americans still take the Declaration of Independence pretty seriously. Those lines about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Or, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
In both cases, a sort of a libertarian, if people aren't harming themselves, what's your problem with it? Argument is the sort of the winning argument, right? And I think that that's an argument with lots of cultural power.
To be socially libertarian, you don't necessarily have to accept someone's personal choices. You can still, I know a lot of very, very religious people who are libertarian, who might say that, I don't agree with your choices, but it's none of the government's business as long as you're not doing harm to anyone else.
There have been a number of legal and sometimes symbolic, perhaps, in cultural achievements, but not on the order of the kind of change that we witnessed during, say during the 1930s, when so much of American economic life was in disarray, and an administration came in with sweeping legislation to effectively reorganize the large sectors of the economy.
So in other words, this kind of rapid social change happens because people start to understand each other and start to see these changes as a logical extension of our existing values.
Caroline Cornish with that. And while Locke has been called the father of liberalism, the professors in that story say there is a common link to his thinking and populism, which is now associated with the Republican Party.